Hi, I'm Alex Goldman, and this is Hyperfixed. Each week on our show, listeners write in with their problems, big and small, and I solve them. Or at least I try. And if I don't, I at least give a good reason why I can't. This week, Pretzels to the people.
It is really humid in there. It's very busy, and it's also probably one of the densest parts of Brooklyn. Like, that's probably as dense as it gets.
This is Jed. He was born and raised on the Upper West Side of New York, but he has lived in Brooklyn for the last 5 years. And what he's describing right now is the epicenter of this week's question. His neighborhood subway stop. The Atlantic Avenue Barclays Center Station.
To call it just a subway station, it's underplaying it a little bit because it connects like 9 or 10 different lines, and then it leads to a terminal for the Long Island Railroad. And then on top of that is a whole other layer that is a mall.
The Atlantic Avenue Barclays Center Station is not just a beast of a name. It's also a beast of a place. It's consistently ranked as the #1 busiest subway station in Brooklyn. And the reason it's so busy is because this one hub connects downtown Brooklyn with the rest of New York City, and the rest of New York City to the Barclays Center, which is like the Brooklyn equivalent of Madison Square Garden. The Brooklyn Nets play there, Bad Bunnies played there. As far as event spaces go, it's really a world-class venue. But the subway station you take to get there? Not so much. Like Jed said, it's humid, it's busy, and the funny thing is, that's not even Jed's biggest problem with the station.
On the upper end, in the mall, there is one Wetzel's Pretzels, and it looks like any Wetzel's Pretzels. And then within the system, on the top floor, there's a Wetzel's Pretzels, and on the bottom floor, there is another Wetzel's Pretzels. And the spaces that they're in, they look like no larger than a broom closet. It just kind of doesn't make sense. I don't know how you set up one place like that, much less two, much less a third location.
Sometimes we get a question that's immediately interesting. We can see that there's a knot to untangle, and even if we can't untangle it, we know the journey of trying will be a story in itself. But Jed's question was not one of those questions. It seemed so simple and so stakesless, I can't even tell you what compelled us to respond. Even Jed was a little embarrassed about this question. But the more he told us about this, the more interesting it became. It wasn't just about the fact that there were 3 of these soft pretzel franchises in the same subway complex. It was that they were comically close to one another. If you were to walk a circuit between all of them, how far away are they from one another?
You could get to all of them within a minute. It's really that quick.
Wow.
I don't know if we can pull up like a floor plan of Atlantic Terminal or something, but literally you're walking on the top floor of like where the subways are, and you see the Wetzel's Pretzels on your right-hand side. You go down the stairs, and there's the other Wetzel's Pretzels. They're that close. And then the walkway to the next one, not very far off.
When did you notice that there were 3 Wetzel's Pretzels locations?
By the time I moved into Brooklyn, like the one in the mall, that was already there. And then about 2 years ago, the other 2 moved in. I don't know if they moved in at the same time, but they definitely moved in within the same month. I think the one on the lower floor had moved in first. And I'm like, oh, that's strange. I didn't even know that there was enough space to put anything there. And then the one on the floor above moved in as well. I'm like, what are we doing? This is excessive.
That is so weird. I mean, I'm definitely curious about this, but like, what would a solution look like to you?
I don't know what a solve is that clearly. I needed to air my grievances more than anything, which is why I wasn't expecting like a solid, oh, like we made the perfect cake, or like how did this fucking cat medicine thing happen? Those are both great episodes, by the way. But yeah, I don't know how this can turn into a 40-minute anything.
Listen, we've done much more with much less. Underneath Jed's skepticism, there are 3 questions. First, he wants to understand why there are 3 Wetzel's Pretzels clustered so close together in the Atlantic Avenue Barclays terminal. Second, he wants to know if they're competitors or collaborators. And third, he wants to know if any of these locations are actually turning a profit. And while Jed wasn't sure there was actually any meat on the bones of these questions, something told us there had to be. And we weren't the only ones who thought so.
Yeah, no, Jed's question is actually fascinating. It's like a window into the whole landscape around us.
This is Alexei Horowitz-Ghazi. He is one of the hosts and reporters of NPR's business and economics podcast, Planet Money. And the reason we reached out to him is because shortly after our conversation with Jed, we discovered that this thing that was happening at the Atlantic Barclays Station was not at all unique to the Atlantic Barclays Station. Turns out there are also 3 Wetzel's Pretzels at the American Dream Mall in New Jersey. At the Del Amo Fashion Center in Torrance, California, there are 4 Wetzel's Pretzels. And at the Crypto.com Arena, where the LA Lakers play, there are 5 Wetzel's Pretzels locations. And these are not the only places where clusters of Wetzel's appear in America. In fact, the more we looked into it, the more we noticed where one Wetzel's Pretzels location exists, other Wetzel's Pretzels are often very close by. Now, clearly, there was some corporate strategy fueling these clusters of Wetzel's, but for the life of me, I couldn't understand what it was. Having so many storefronts so close together just seemed to violate the most basic laws of supply and demand. So we reached out to the Planet Money team, hoping they could shed some light on what we might be missing here. But folks, they didn't know either. This whole clustering thing seemed just as counterintuitive to them as it did to us. And for a reporter like Alexei, who spent years investigating questions about consumer behavior and the corporate systems that feed it, that not knowing was actually very exciting. So he told us he wanted a piece of the action.
Sign me up. Let's go.
What is it about Jed's question that is so interesting to you?
I think Jed's question is a question that I have had personally and that I think a lot of us have. It's like exactly in this delectable sweet spot, or savory, I guess, in this case, of like something in the world that is all around us all the time. Like all of a sudden you'll be surrounded by like 3 Starbucks on a given street or McDonald's or whatever else. And it sort of feels like you're watching the ebb and flow of some sort of titanic corporate competitive battle that's happening, but you don't really understand why or who's competing with who or how it could possibly make economic sense for any of the actors involved to so oversaturate us with the same franchise in such a small space. And so it just felt like one of those things that is like a tiny question and it's kind of funny because it's so small, but it actually touches on like the fabric of cities and just the things we walk around and are surrounded by every day. So I am eager to get out there and hit the streets and figure out what's going on.
Go for it. I'd love to hear the answer. And not having to go out and do it myself makes it even more enticing to me.
Yes. Let me do this one. Let me ride. I'll send you in a more whatever I find. Stay tuned.
Just like that, he was off to the races. And a few short weeks later, we got an email from Alexei saying that he'd connected with Wetzel's corporate and that he'd already learned a ton about their real estate strategy from the very guy who leads it.
When people say, what's your job? My job is to bring pretzels to the people. I even have a wristband on that says pretzels to the people. It's like kind of our mantra, like wherever there's people, there should be pretzels.
This is John Fisher. He's head of development for Wetzel's Pretzels, which means his job is to help the company's franchisees find and build successful locations. And this thing he just said about bringing pretzels to the people, it is more than just a mantra. It is the key to Wetzel's business strategy and the answer to Jed's questions. Okay, so remember a couple minutes ago when Alexei was talking about how this question might be the key to understanding not just why there are clusters of Wetzel's, but why there are clusters of Starbucks and McDonald's and all of these other brands that we see lining the streets of American cities? Well, John wasn't so sure about that. And of course, he can't actually speak to the real estate strategies of those other companies because he obviously doesn't work for those other companies. But what he can say with 100% certainty is that the real estate needs of Wetzel's Pretzels are very different from the needs of those other companies. And the thing that makes them so different is that unlike coffee and burgers, pretzels just aren't the kind of product people go out of their way to buy.
People don't get in their car and say, I'm going to go get a pretzel and I'm going to drive to the mall, walk 15 minutes in the parking lot, go in through, try to park in and get a pretzel and then come out, right? They're going to go to the mall and happen to get a pretzel while they're there.
In the world of retail, there's a name for this kind of thing. It's called an impulse product. And unlike destination products, which are the kind of things people go out into the world with the intention of buying, impulse products are defined by the fact that nobody's really planning on buying them. So how do you get people to buy something they didn't plan to buy? For Wetzel's, it's all about bringing pretzels to the people. It's about placing their storefronts in high-traffic, high-visibility areas where people are already walking around, and then placing additional storefronts along that same route to create as many opportunities for repeat exposure as the location can feasibly sustain.
The business model is impulse-driven. And so, I'm capturing people at different places, in different times within their route, or I'm even exposing them to the thought and the smell at one place where then they see it a second time and they're like, I can't resist.
Yes.
I escaped once, but not the second time. I need one now.
It's a strategy of attrition, of delicious olfactory attrition.
I mean, obviously, this part makes sense, right? The more these pretzels are in your face, the more their smell is in your nose, the more likely you are to buy this thing you didn't intend to buy. But the real question for us is, aren't all of these Wetzels eating into each other's profits? Or are they somehow immune to the laws of supply and demand?
How do you think about when it makes sense to have multiple Wetzel's locations in the same broad space versus the risk of cannibalizing your own sales or oversaturating the place?
Yeah, it's really unique. I used to work for a pizza company, and it was a take and bake pizza company. You didn't go there unless you planned on buying a pizza. It was an ultimate destination purchase, right? You don't just happen to walk around and buy a raw pizza and, you kind of know that you're going to go there, right? So what's interesting is you have the ultimate destination type of concepts where you build a store, and if you put a store 5 miles away, the franchisee is really mad because, hey, I have customers coming from over there and, I'm going to lose 10, 20% of my sales. Wetzel's is kind of the opposite of that. We literally have malls that have 5 stores in the same mall. Because we're an impulse product, for us, it's really just about, is the mall big enough or is there enough traffic and different occasions to support different impulse purchases in that mall? And is there cannibalization when you open a second store? A little bit, but not very much. It's pretty amazing. I think I was surprised when I got here. I was like, really? You can have 2 stores in the same mall? I've never seen that before. And now I'm sitting here putting 3 and 4 in some malls because it's really about that impulse nature. So, people go, wait, how can you have so many stores in the same area? Well, you have to be an impulse brand. You have to be a brand where people are making the decision right as they're walking in front of you to have your product or not. They're not going there specifically for you. So, whether it's a Subway or a theme park or a stadium, you're going to have different locations based on where the people are to service them. And so not a lot of businesses can do that.
One of the other big factors undergirding this model is that corporate Wetzels will not let different franchisees open storefronts under the same roof. So anytime you see a cluster of Wetzel's Pretzels in the wild, know that every storefront under the same roof is owned by the same person. They aren't actually competing with each other, and any cannibalization that's happening has been at least partially planned. Also, not all of these clusters were designed to run this particular gambit. Some franchisees will open additional locations in the same space just to make sure that those spaces don't get taken by the competition. So these clusters function more like a defensive mapping sort of strategy. The other big thing is that the company gets final approval on all franchise locations. And because they've had the most success in malls and transport hubs and event spaces, that's where most of these clusters will be.
So in this case, it's like, okay, these locations may seem to a layman like me walking through being like, why would you possibly have these 2 pretzel stands so close to each other? Well, the proof is sort of in the profits.
I think you have to look at every concept and what works for that concept, where they are on that, I'll call it the destination impulse spectrum.
Yes.
And if you're on the very high side of the impulse spectrum, you probably can get away with having several locations very close to each other to capture the traffic. And if you're on the other side of that spectrum, you probably don't want to think about doing that. It'd probably be, a lot of cannibalization and not really work.
Yeah.
So now we know why these locations are clustered so close together. That is to say, we know why they're there in theory. But we still wanted to know if this strategy was actually working in the Atlantic Barclay station. Were the 3 storefronts actually making money? And we knew just who we had to ask. After the break, answers from the man behind the Atlantic Avenue Wetzels. Welcome back to the show. So before the break, we met a guy named Jed who'd recently made a perplexing observation. At his local subway stop, the Atlantic Avenue Barclay Center station, there were 3 Wetzel's Pretzels so close together that it seemed illogical. And he wanted to know why. Why so many? Why so close together? How could this possibly make financial sense? So we passed Jed's question on to one of our business-minded buddies, Alexei Horowitz-Ghazi from NPR's Planet Money, and he returned to us with an answer. Wetzel's knows that they're selling a product that people aren't going out of their way to buy. So they strategically cluster their stores to make sure their product is in people's way as frequently as possible. And that's more or less all there is to it. At least, in theory. See, we still wanted to know if the strategy was actually working in practice, specifically at the site that launched this investigation to begin with, the Atlantic Avenue Barclay Center station. So Alexei reached out to the guy who owns all 3 of those Wetzels. His name is Ricky Alam. He is a very seasoned Wetzel's Pretzels franchisee, and he's based in Southern California, which also happens to be where Alexei's based. So Ricky invited Alexei to meet up in person at the site of Ricky's first Wetzel's Pretzels location in the Westfield Fashion Square Mall in Sherman Oaks, California.
Okay, testing. It's Alexei. It is Thursday, March 19th at 3:10 Pacific time. I've just gotten to I think it's the Westfield Mall in Sherman Oaks, California, and I am on a sort of pretzel mission. I've talked to John Fisher up at Wetzel's Pretzels HQ. He walked me through kind of the basics of how companies think about when it makes economic sense to have a couple franchise locations near each other. That it really comes down to kind of what type of restaurant it is and what the flow of customer traffic is. But we've come here to get it straight from the franchisee's mouth. Okay, here goes nothing. I've just parked and let's go find Ricky.
Now, this is a little off story, but it made me laugh so much that I wanted to share. The first time I chatted with Alexei, he confessed that when it comes to shopping malls, he's a bit of a neophyte. He said there wasn't a major mall culture in the city he grew up in, so he wasn't super familiar with things like Wetzel's and Cinnabon. And although he told me his local mall did have a Sbarro, he pronounced it Shbarro, which honestly told me more about his relationship to malls than anything he could have said. And that's why I wasn't surprised to learn that just minutes after Alexei walked into the mall with recording gear strapped to his body and a microphone positioned proudly in his hand, Alexei was intercepted by mall security and questioned about what exactly he was doing there. Thankfully, it didn't last long, because after Alexei explained what he was doing, he tried interviewing the guard about their thoughts on this pretzel cluster question, and I think the guard was just so profoundly disinterested in this project, they ended up letting him go. So Alexei continued on his way, and before long, he spotted Ricky.
I see Ricky in the distance. There we go.
How you doing?
Good, how are you? Ricky, I presume?
Good to see you,
Good
man.
to see you too. What a pleasure.
No problem. Same here.
This is Ricky Alam. He's been a Wetzel's franchisee for the last 20 years, and the way he tells it, pretzels were kind of like his gateway to his American dream. After moving from LA to Bangladesh back in the early 90s, Ricky worked a series of odd jobs. But in his heart, there was always one goal: to have a business of his own. So Ricky opened a liquor store, which failed miserably. Then he started a business that sold painted hermit crabs from kiosks at the mall. And that one worked out pretty well. But he wanted something that felt more permanent. And that's when he started looking at franchises. Pretzels aren't like a big thing in Bangladesh, but his years in the United States taught Ricky that Americans love hot dough. So he opened this Wetzel's in 2004, and within a year and a half, he opened a second location right here in the same mall.
Within a year and a half, I opened the second location on the first floor. And that took a hit on this one a little bit. 10-15% business dropped from the first location. But within 6 months, it came back. Whatever the business I was doing on the first location, it came back. Second location is doing its own business. And I think within another few years, I was able to open another location. And in a few years, another location. So yeah, I mean, goal was to open at least one location every other year or whatnot.
How many have you opened in total?
17 locations, combined east and west.
So 17 locations. I mean, that sounds like a little pretzel empire.
So far, so good.
And when did you get a sense that getting into the dough business might eventually translate into rolling in the dough?
You know, not every dough business is going to make you the dough, remember. There is always risk. Even the proven business, you got to make sure the location is right.
But how do you make sure that a location is right? How do you decide if a mall can support a second storefront? Or if a Subway/mall can support 3?
We are driven by where people are. Let's put it this way. So we do sit down and count, literally hand count how many people passing by in front of this potential location. So there is a certain amount of traffic has to pass by, and then we open. So to take in that consideration to open a second location is that we do the same thing. Going to the second location, if it's within the same mall or same train station or even the airport or what have you, we do the same counting. How many people passing by? Are these the same traffic, second floor versus first floor? We take all those under consideration before you open the second location.
How do you count? Do you have like an app or a little...
Well, back in the days, even still as of right now, I have one of those clicker. Yeah, but now you have an app, you have all the sophisticated software and whatnot. Yes, Pretzels do their due diligence, but at the same time, I like to come in and sit down just like this, and I want to see how many people passing by. And I count, literally, with the phone. I put a timer and I count.
And is there a number that you want to see or some sort of mark you're trying to get to?
You got to have 15 to 1,700 people every given hour.
Okay, 15 to 1,700 an hour.
Yeah.
But Ricky stressed that this is not a perfect science. Sometimes, he says, the foot traffic just doesn't convert to sales in the way you thought it would. And sometimes, the foot traffic you thought you could count on just suddenly dries up. Which brings us to the question at hand, about whether or not the cluster of Wetzel's Pretzels at the Atlantic Barclay station is actually profitable. So, when Ricky opened his first Atlantic storefront in 2016, it seemed like a perfect location. As you've already heard, Wetzel's Pretzels does best in places like malls and transit hubs and event centers, and this first location seemed to offer a bit of all of those things. The spot was in a mall, above a subway station, across the street from an event center. And for several years, it felt like getting the best of all of these worlds. And then, COVID hit. And like so many other businesses in the city, the Atlantic Terminal Wetzel's was forced to shut down. The thing is that when the store reopened 6 months later, the pre-pandemic business just didn't come back.
My business dropped compared to 2018 and 19. It dropped 40, almost 50%, 40 or 50%. So I was in a situation that I thought about shutting it down, but I couldn't do it because I have the obligation. I signed the long-term contract.
Because of this long-term lease, Ricky was forced to leave the lights on. And for the next couple years, he took a loss at the Atlantic Avenue location. And then, one day a few years ago, the landlord came to Ricky with a proposition. He said that he had a couple of retail locations available inside the subway terminal, one on the first floor and one on the second. These locations were about the size of broom closets, and they didn't have kitchens. And technically, they were only about 100 feet from one another. But because they were inside the subway station, they could do something that the mall location couldn't: cater to commuters directly. Ricky didn't really want to take on both locations, but it was an all or nothing deal. So Ricky took both, and his fortunes began to change.
Those two satellite locations actually helped me to stay in the business within this mall, because upstairs, main location, I'm still suffering.
So the idea to expand to the other locations was kind of to offset the losses that were happening in the main one in a way?
Not exactly, to be honest with you. It did help me, but it was not in my thought that it's going to offset my loss from upstairs. My thought was upstairs, that's where I bake my goods. Since I bake it, those two locations, I don't bake anything. I don't make anything. I take the food from upstairs and I just sell it over there. So since I have, it's like a commissary, let's put it this way. Since I have this facility, let's open those two locations. It will be less labor. Because I run those two with one person each location. Everything else comes from upstairs, A to Z, pretzel, the lemonade, and you name it, the frozen drink and the soda. Everything comes from upstairs.
What Ricky's saying is that unlike the other Wetzel's properties he owns, the Atlantic Barclays cluster is actually so close together, he can run 3 locations out of 1 kitchen, which drastically reduces his operating costs, or at least his cost per location. Also, even though these satellite locations are physically close together, because they're on different platforms, they're actually serving different groups of customers. So no matter which way you're moving inside the Atlantic Barclays station, you're going to pass one of Ricky's Wetzel's pretzels.
So maybe just to boil down the question, I think the listener's question was, passing through the Atlantic terminal was, how could it possibly be make economic sense to have the same business so close to each other in the same space? What's the kind of boiled down answer to that question?
Answer to this is that both location has its own customer. Yes, there are some spillover from the first floor to the second floor, but each location has its own customer.
And especially for a product that you're kind of catching them in a moment, or they're smelling something and deciding to stop and that sort of thing. Is that important?
Absolutely. It's that product, the smell, the sampling. This is very, there's no escaping, let's put it this way.
I like it. It feels like we're getting to the bottom of the pretzel logic.
Yes. Look, it's all I'm doing right here, I'm bringing the pretzels to the people, that's all.
I've heard that before.
There you go.
Alexi asked John Fisher to check the sales figures for all 3 Atlantic Avenue Barclays Wetzels, and he confirmed that pretzels were being sold at all 3 locations. But because he couldn't give us access to their books, we decided to do a little data collecting of our own. On a random day, in the middle of the week, we sent Hyperfix producer Amor Yates to the Atlantic Avenue Barclays subway station and asked her to spend some time simply watching the Wetzels. Amor lives in Brooklyn, and she's been through this station more times than she can count. But this was the first time she'd actually just stood there. And while she was standing, she saw something that she had never seen before. Something Jed had also missed on his many trips through the subway station. There was a line. At different moments, at each of these Wetzel's locations, people were stopping to buy pretzels. It was easy to miss them because the transactions were happening so quickly the lines never got super long. But sure enough, when a subway car would pull in and a wave of people would go by on their way from one place to another, 2 or 3 of them would stop. And whether it was because they caught the aroma of warm dough or simply because they were feeling a bit peckish and there were no other grab-and-go options around at that moment, they decided to buy a pretzel. And presumably, over the course of the day, this was happening enough to keep these businesses in business, which keeps guys like Ricky reinvesting in this model. So as strange as it seems to have so many Wetzels clustered so closely together, from a business perspective, the recipe works.
This is amazing. I'm agog.
Here's Jed again. I've never heard anybody say agog on this show before. Congratulations.
First time for everything, I guess.
What is it that amazes you about this?
The fact that you guys can make a story out of this, that there's something to find. I was fully expecting you guys to just say, all right, there's nothing here. Thank you so much. It's like, we had fun, but we got to leave it right here.
Thank you for submitting this question, Jed. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Amor, Alex. Oh my God. This is, okay, just as one more thing, I feel like I was given a genie and granted one wish, and I felt like I wasted my wish, and that is absolutely not the case.
Not at all.
No, this was great. Hyperfixed is produced and edited by Emma Cortland, Amor Yates, Sari Safar-Sukenik, and Tori Dominguez-Peak. This week's reporting efforts were spearheaded by Alexei Horowitz-Ghazi. The music is by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder and me. It was engineered by Tony Williams. Fact-checking by Naomi Barr. You can get bonus episodes, join our Discord, get discounts on merch, and a whole lot more at hyperfixedpod.com/join. Hyperfixed is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, creator-owned, listener-supported podcasts. Discover audio with vision at radiotopia.fm. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you on the next one.
Radiotopia from